Hello, it's Lawrence Romanowski from Calgary, Canada, and what we have here is an 87 Mercedes-Benz 560 SEC. And now I did another video on this car and did a walk around, and then I thought, well, why don't I do a buyer's guide? I've had about a dozen 80s Mercedes over the years and accumulated a bunch of experience owning and driving these cars, and I thought, well, why don't I just go and do a walk around, and if you're looking at one of these cars, maybe this will be helpful. Okay, so this is and many of these comments I think are going to be applicable to any Mercedes-Benz from the 80s, but let's start with the 126 bodies. These are the sedans and the coupes from about 79 to 91. I guess the first thing is to pick the right model. Now, obviously, the coupes are a little bit more desirable and a little bit rarer than the sedans. The sedans are much more plentiful. When you're looking at these cars, there's different engines. This is they call it the 117 engine, and it would have debuted all the way back in the 1971 280 SE 3.5. And it was a fuel-injected engine, one of the very first fuel-injected engines, and the first sort of modern engine. And that engine has been in production from 1971 all the way through to, I guess, 91. And then they changed it to a four-cam, four-valve per cylinder engine. Anyway, it used to have a cast iron block and did so up until the 80s. And then in I think 79, they would have come out with an all alloy block. So this would have been where they have the silicon based alloy, and there's a process by which the bores have silicone crystals impregnated in them, etc. So doing away without the steel liners that you'd normally find in an alloy engine. Okay, so the 380 engine that came out in the early 80s had a single row timing chain, and this was prone to failure. Actually, a lot of those cars, or many of those cars, blew up. And there was a dealer installed upgrade for a double row timing chain. So for any early 80s W126s or the SLs actually, you need to look at whether it's had the double row timing chain upgrade, and that was, I think, a $5,000 or $6,000 repair item. I think in 84, 83 or 84. The factory put the double row timing chain as standard. With the 420s and the 560s, you didn't have to worry about that because they were all double row. The sedans came in 380, 500, 420s, and 560s. The 560 was the one that got the self-leveling rear suspension, which is either good or bad depending on how you look at it. When the car's 30 years old now, a lot of most of these systems will need attention, and there are some nitrogen and hydraulic fluid spheres in the back, and basically what happens is one fluid or gas compensates for the other, and then it acts on a lever and raises or lowers the rear suspension. So there is a hydraulic pump in the engine bay. There is a reservoir with hydraulic fluid. There's a couple of spheres, almost like the Citroen ones or the Rolls-Royce ones, which are the same. And then there's some shocks in the back, and all those parts aren't cheap, and you can probably spend $3,000 or $4,000 upgrading all that system. So with any 560 Mercedes, that's one of the first things you look at, and the way you tell is that the car will sag in the rear. And you can see that with the sedans, especially. They're pronounced. So this one doesn't. But if you see a car sitting low, then you know that it could be in for a big bill. The bodies on the cars are exceptionally durable. Certainly, they will rust after this many years. And where they usually go is you will find usually rust starting right here on on top of this molding and along the door as well. Water gets in there, and then where the molding attaches to the door, the rust starts and it'll bubble up. Once you see the rust, once it's gone that far, the whole door and the fenders are probably shot. Actually, and if you see rust on these cars, it's probably a losing battle. There's enough of these out there, enough of them out there in good shape for reasonable money, that if the car is starting to rust, you probably want to walk away from it. The trim is also a little bit susceptible here, and they'll actually rust along this chrome piece as well. The chrome will rust, and that's something to look for. All these cars delaminate the rear window. This one's good, but if it's been left in the elements or it's been winter driven, you'll start to see a cloudy white delamination here, and then it takes out you can see the little wires for the heated rear window, and then it takes out the rear window. So you start getting delamination, up in this area, and then all of a sudden you've only got a bit of the window that'll defrost. I would look carefully at the way the doors close. It should be beautiful, actually. Cars don't do that anymore. That's an 80s Mercedes thing. And I take a look at the door striker and this piece here. If it's been hit and the doors haven't been put together, it hasn't lined up properly, you'll start to see some wear, or you might see this piece moved. And there's some adjustment there to get the door perfect, but I'm always leery of seeing evidence where this piece has been fooled around with. And also you should see the stickers in the door jambs. So that's something else that I look for. Weather stripping on these cars, it affects the wind noise and so on. And after 25 or 30 years, it can get dry. And you can see that this one, it's starting to dry, but it's still okay. But you could spend several $1,000s redoing the weather stripping on the car. The sunroofs are very fiddly to repair. Taking the headliner down and so on. So if the sunroof doesn't work, that could be a couple $1,000 job to replace that. Okay, so let's go underneath this car and look at the engine bay.